Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Lawmakers are facing heightened security concerns and a compressed timeline to pass critical legislation. The Senate approved a rules change to speed up confirmation of Trump administration nominees, while the House and Senate remain divided on appropriations. With just weeks left in the fiscal year, Bloomberg Government's Lauren Duggan is here to break down the path to a continuing resolution and the risk if it fails. Lauren, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Last week was a pretty tough week, and a lot of tensions boiled over in Congress, and a lot of members are concerned about their personal safety. What are you hearing, and how is it affecting the general atmosphere?
Definitely worried about their safety, the safety of their family, their spouses, their children, and everything else with the tragic killing of Charlie Kirk in Utah. He was not obviously himself a member of Congress, but someone who many members of Congress on the Republican side worked with, looked up to, and certainly younger conservatives have been drawn to the movement in part because of Charlie Kirk's activities around the country. So they could probably see themselves in that sort of setting where they're in the public, meeting with constituents, open air, and they think about that. They think about what happened last year with President Donald Trump being shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they think about the killings in Minnesota of lawmakers there. So it adds to this kind of concern they've had about being public figures and what that may mean to your personal safety and your families. And it's definitely on their minds for sure.
And how is that affecting what needs to be collaborative spirit to get a lot of this work done? Are they able to come across the aisles together to work on some of this stuff, or is it too political?
I mean, the entire environment is kind of tough right now. There were moments, especially right after the shooting was announced, where Gavin Newsom and others have said this is, terrible and it shouldn't be condoned, should be condemned, and that. So I think there was unity around that and the tragedy of that. But, there's still real partisan divides that on important issues that they have to deal with, and they kind of have to still work through some of those issues. But, when it comes to their own safety, what do you do about funding? I think those are questions where the funding about security specifically, I think there's issues there where they can work together, and I'm sure there will be a bipartisan reckoning on that and how to move forward.
Well, speaking of bipartisan, the Senate passed what people are calling the nuclear option rules change in terms of speeding up confirmations, not exactly putting a Band-Aid on bipartisan division here. What impact do you think this is going to have?
It will be tough. Anytime you go nuclear, it kind of poisons the well of other things. And the reason it's nuclear is a lot of Senate procedures are underlined with this supermajority principle, whether it's 60 votes or often 67 votes you need to change the rules. But they did this with a simple majority. Republicans said, we're going to create this new process, basically, where we'll consider nominees in block, in big groups. And we'll see the results of that probably play out later this week as this rules change takes effect and they move to take up, I think there's maybe 4 dozen in one group that they'll try to confirm at once rather than going nominee by nominee by nominee. So it makes it quicker. Democrats said, this is making us more of a rubber stamp and giving us less chance to deal with each nominee on their own. They've said this won't affect cabinet nominees. It'll be sub-cabinet, that it won't affect judges because they want to make different distinctions there for these lifetime appointments to the federal judiciary. But it will speed up and probably by the end of the next couple of weeks, if they use this process, get a lot more of Donald Trump's nominees into those jobs.
It's not dissimilar from a similar rule that the Democrats proposed when they were in the majority, right?
Right. They used this procedure at one point to say instead of needing 60 votes, you need 50 votes. And that initially applied to most nominees, but not all. And then in the Republican era, they made it apply to Supreme Court nominees, which were, I believe, the major exception. And then they used this to limit the debate time as well. It used to be 30 hours on everybody, and then they narrowed it to 2 for a lot of positions. So this has been kind of the narrowing of this process over time and leaves some bad feelings every time. It makes it, on the other hand, it will make it easier for Democrats if they win the White House and control the Senate to get those picks through. So, they have benefited from this process even as they lament it as it's happening.
I'm speaking with Lauren Duggan. He's the Deputy News Director at Bloomberg Government. Well, all of that leads us to, Lauren, the conversation about how many days left in the fiscal year and what is Congress doing with it?
Well, they're not supposed to be here for very much more of it. The calendar right now has them in this week, out next week as Rosh Hashanah is observed, and then in the 29th and 30th for those key dates right before the October 1 start of the fiscal year. So not a lot of time to get done what they need to get done. And this is an area where Democrats do have a role because of that 60 vote requirement in the Senate to get something passed. It's not like reconciliation. It's not like this nuclear option. That isn't on the table for that issue. So Democrats have leverage and they want to use it. One of the main issues here for them is health care and the looming expiration of Affordable Care Act premium credits that were created back in COVID, extended and come to an end this year. And that could raise what some people are paying for their health care next year. So that's a big issue for them. They'd like to see it addressed. Republicans don't really want to address it as part of the CR, they've said, because it's not a policy that they all support. There are some who want to extend it, but it's not the prime position of the party. So, that's an important thing that they'll have to work through. Will they draw a line in the sand on that or relent and try and keep the government open past October 1?
So they're going to have to come up with at least a draft CR, one would hope, by the end of September?
Yes, I think we'll have to pass something. If nothing's in place by October 1, we'd be talking about a partial government shutdown. There's talk about a CR plus maybe 3 of the bills that are smaller, easier to come to agreement on because of the nature of what they cover: agriculture, FDA, ledge branch, and military construction. Those are kind of more bipartisan, less contentious ones. Then maybe they could do that plus a CR for the other 9. That, I think, is the dream, and they've taken some steps towards that. But if they can't get agreement on anything, then we'll be having a very different discussion in a couple of weeks.
They are moving some of the bills through the committees, though.
Oh, that's right. The House actually completed its work last week, and the committee got all 12 through the committee. They've had a few through the floor. So, the thing that an appropriations chair, Tom Cole, would call regular order and making progress on that, even voting to send bills to a conference with the Senate, is an unusual step in recent years. So, yeah, there is a lot of activity toward that, but we'll see if they can get a bicameral, bipartisan agreement that can keep the government open and move some more of these things forward.
And one more bill that we usually expect to get through is the NDAA. It's made some progress, but people are hanging ornaments on that Christmas tree as it goes along. What are you hearing in terms of the prospects there?
Well, the House passed its version last week, and like you say, they attached a number of things to it. A lot of interest in the repeal of the authorizations for use of military force for Iraq back in 1991 and 2002. That was one of the bipartisan wins there because there were Republicans who banded with Democrats to do that. But a lot of other bills hitched a ride there. The contracting overhaul, the SPEED Act, as it's known, was part of the House bill and would be part of any discussions with the Senate. The Senate is technically still debating NDAA, but there hasn't been a ton of activity on that yet, in part because they've been dealing with this nominations question we just talked about. So we'll be watching to see if the Senate can make progress on that, or if they kind of maybe let the floor action wither and still work between the House and Senate Armed Services Committees to get a final deal on that before the end of the year. That's usually the target for finishing it, is December 31st, not September 30th. And they could very well maybe achieve that if they can work through the differences, which there are differences between the bills, but we'll see what they can do.
So much to watch in the next few days then.
Absolutely, always.
Lauren, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This is Lauren Duggan, the Deputy News Director at Bloomberg Government. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.